So let's talk about military robots. We're going to dive into how we went from these clunky lab machines to actual AI-powered teammates out on the battlefield. And the wildest part? The future isn't some far-off sci-fi movie. In a lot of ways, it's already here. I want you to just picture this for a second. It's 2030. A sergeant's out on patrol, but next to her isn't another soldier. It's this quiet, four-legged robot, just silently carrying all their gear. And overhead, a whole swarm of tiny drones is mapping the valley, feeding all that data to an AI that's flagging potential threats. The AI suggests a route, but she, the sergeant, she makes the final call. This whole scene, this is pretty much exactly where we're heading. Okay, so how in the world did we get here? To really get a grip on the future, you've got to look at the past. And trust me, the speed at which this technology has accelerated, it's been absolutely staggering. I mean, just look at how fast this all happened. Back in the 1960s, we had Shaky the robot, which was basically a university science project that could poke around a controlled room. Now, fast forward to the 2000s, and suddenly DARPA is funding these robotic mules like Big Dog. By the 2010s, drones aren't just for spying anymore. They're used for strikes. And today, right now, we're seeing massive drone swarms become a defining part of a major war. It's an incredible, almost unbelievable jump from a lab to the front lines, all within a single lifetime. But progress is never really a straight line. And this slide gets at something so important. The hype is almost always way ahead of the reality. The promise, right, was this silent robotic pack mule. But the reality? It was a machine so loud it sounded like a lawnmower, totally giving away a patrol's position. This is the perfect example of how super advanced tech can fail, not because of some complex AI bug, but because of simple, real-world stuff in the messy environment of a battlefield. But this whole story isn't just about the technology, is it? We have to talk about the human side of things. Because these systems, they don't just change battlefield tactics. They fundamentally change the psychology of war itself for absolutely everyone involved. Just take a second and really think about this quote. The video game interface. On one hand, it creates this weird sense of detachment, of distance, right? But at the very same time, the operator is intensely, painstakingly focused, analyzing every single pixel on a screen to make a life-or-death decision from thousands of miles away. It's a deeply strange and incredibly stressful paradox to live in. And that paradox, it has very real consequences. For the operators, studies are showing a higher risk of moral injury and PTSD, because even from that distance, the weight of their actions is just immense. And what about for the civilians on the ground? Living under the constant threat of an unseen drone can lead to chronic anxiety, to hypervigilance. The scars from this kind of warfare, they're often completely invisible. So you have this huge psychological shift going on, and it's happening at the same time as a massive technological one. I'm talking about the rise of cheap, accessible drones, which are just completely rewriting the rules of conflict all over the globe. Just look at this number, 8,060. That's how many of these Iranian-developed Shahed drones Russia has reportedly launched at Ukraine by late 2024. This isn't a strategy about one perfect surgical strike. No, this is a strategy of saturation, just overwhelming your opponent's defenses with wave after wave of cheap drones. It's a brutal numbers game, and it's devastatingly effective, especially against infrastructure. And you can see how different drones are built for totally different jobs. On one side, you've got something like the Turkish Bayraktar TB2, which got famous for enabling these very precise, high-value strikes. And on the other side, you've got the Iranian Shahed 136, which is basically a kamikaze drone. It's designed for a one-way trip to overwhelm defenses. They're both pretty low-cost ways to multiply your force, but they represent two completely different ways of thinking about modern war. And that leads us to what might be the single most difficult question of all. As these systems get more and more autonomous, as they start making their own decisions about who or what to target, who is actually responsible when something goes horribly wrong? This brings us to a huge concept that's being pushed really hard by everyone from ethicists to folks at the UN. It's called meaningful human control. The idea is actually pretty simple. A human being, not a machine, must always have the final say before lethal force is used. It's sort of a line in the sand, meant to prevent us from creating fully autonomous killing machines. But see, even with a human supposedly in the loop, that question of who's responsible gets incredibly complicated, incredibly fast.
Let's say an AI system misidentifies a target, and an operator, trusting the AI's judgment, gives the okay for a strike. Who's really at fault there? And this is where that whole chain of command just gets impossibly blurry. Is it the programmer who wrote the original algorithm? The company that manufactured the drone? What about the commander who decided to deploy that system in the first place? Or is it the operator who made that final click? See, autonomy just spreads the responsibility so thin across so many different people that finding real legal accountability becomes an absolute nightmare. So all of this, it means we are standing at a really critical crossroads. The decisions we make right now about how we develop and use this technology, they're going to define the future of warfare. And look, these aren't some abstract problems for our grandkids to solve. This is all happening right now. We are staring down the barrel of a new global arms race in autonomous weapons. There's a real concern that remote warfare makes it politically cheaper and easier to start wars. We're seeing huge ethical fights inside major tech companies like Google over military projects like Project Maven. The whole debate really comes down to this. Should we just ban these weapons completely, or can we find a way to regulate them? So why does all this matter so much? Because the path this technology takes, it's not set in stone. It's a product of the choices that we are making. The goal could be to use robots for dangerous jobs, like bomb disposal, to save human lives. Or it could be to create systems that make lethal choices with less and less human oversight, creating and institutionalizing totally new kinds of violence. Which brings us right back to where we started, back on that patrol in 2030. The AI makes a suggestion, but the sergeant makes the decision. The critical question we all have to face as a society is whether we have the will to make sure it always stays that way. In the end, what's it going to be? Is the final word human, or is it code?